Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're in Masechtas Nazir daf Beis. We are starting a new Masechta, starting at the Mishnah. Kol kinui nazirus kinazirus. So this Masechta opens in a similar fashion as the previous Masechta that we just concluded, Masechtas Nadarim. And it says, when it comes to a kinui, and we'll discuss in a few moments an example of kinuyim, they have the same status as a Nazir statement itself. Says the Tosis, it says, Kol davar she'enu ikar, anything which is not the main thing, shemo kein nikar kinoi. L'chol of nazirus, l'chol davar ki'il oimer b'shem ikar, dehainu ahei nazir. So ahei nazir is the proper statement, and therefore anything which is a subshoot to that is called a kinoi. Umahani umahavi nazir, nonetheless kinoim work. Ki amar hakinuyim ahei nazik, o naziach, o pachziach, kamo b'shem ha'ikar v'heim nikroim kinuyim. So all these variations of the word nazir are kinuyim, and if you say it, it's clear that that's what your intention is, to become a nazir, and therefore for that reason we say the din is that it also works. Now the difficulty is the next line of the Mishnah. Ha'omer ahei harizen nazir. So ahei is not even a case of a kinoi, as we just saw in Taisus. Rather, it's an example of yadais. The idea of a yad, as is discussed in Masechtas Nadarim, is that if you have a cup with a handle, if you hold the handle, the whole thing lifts up. And that's the symbolism of what yados are in this context as well. So it works. Oh, ahei noah nazir. If a person says, I wish to enhance myself, we say that's also considered to be a yad, and in that situation, he is also considered to be a nazir. Says Taisus. We're going to see in the Gemara that it's also necessary that you have to have a nazir in front of him when he says this statement, so that it's a yad which is clear, or yad v'smeichiach. V'zen nikra yadais nazirus shul gomer diburai umahani l'cholav kol din nazirus ki'il gomer diburai adam ha'oiches bebeis yad. Here explains it, just like a person who's holding onto a handle, shall kli of a cup, umagvia, you lift it up a kaf ki'il oiches a kli. It's like you're holding the kli, like you're holding the kli itself. So a person who makes this statement, it's ki'ilu, and it says, again, you have to be over l'fana, because otherwise it's maybe it's yadayim shen machichais. So, as the Gemara is going to say, that's what's necessary. It says, Taisus, gam zen nikri yados, person says, ahei na. The Gemara mafarish, amai lo avirinhu misasinu l'valachas. Why is it just included into one case? V'lisni hachi ha'omer ahei o ahei na harzin nazir. Because why does it say Harizen Nazir, and then again Nazir? So that is something which will be explained. Back in the Mishnah, a person says any of these kinuyim, Nazik, Naziach, Paziach, Harizen Nazir. As we said, these are kinuyim. And on this, the Tosa says, V'huadin im armer b'lashon hakinuyim kamo Naziach, Paziach, etc. With kinuyim, and this is similar to what was brought down in the Ran on the first daf in Nadarim, nechachu ha'amaroyim b'perik kama de Nadarim. So on daf Yud Masechtas Nadarim is a malchokas. What exactly are kinuyim and why do they work? V'yochanan loshen umoisem. These words are actually from another nation. Pirush shleish l'shaynis. These three languages. Mishivim l'shaynisim. They come from the various 70 languages of the world. The im timer v'livnei Rabbi Yochanan, according to him, Mari Hanach Gimel l'shonos. Why does it mention 3? B'chol ayin l'shonos. That there's so many. Nami im kabel lav nazirus be'echad mahanach l'shonos chayil leha nazirus. Why does the Mishnah limit itself to only those 3 cases? Factices. Yesh loimer denachinami. Right. The gam b'shalosh makirim avinim. If you understand umischavin lekabel nazirus, and he wants to be mekabel nazirus that in another language, har nazir. Aval mahani lishni demasnisin. What's the chiddush of our Mishnah? Ki amar nizrei be'echa min shalosh shaynes halol. If you use one of these 3 languages, of naziach, paziach, naziach, nazik, Chayla Naziros. Nami ki ein mischavin mishum. Even if you didn't necessarily have any intentions. Mishum dedami tvei l'loshen Torah moshanes acher. Because these actually sound very close to the word Nazir and also to the lashon of the Torah. So that's B'shan Rav Yochanan. Rish Lakish Polig, and he disagrees, and he says Ahasam over there in the Darim. Your Meloshin Shabadu Chachamim Melibum. Actually, these words are Chachamim's words. They made up words that the Chachamim themselves made. V'Hasam Parachamai Bedinhu v'Tikninu Rabban Loshin Kinuyim. Why would they make up a bunch of seemingly nonsensical words? V'Heshiv. The Zimnin de Boyamer Hashem Carbon V'Yarmel Hashem Greda. You may just say Hashem's name. L'mapik Shem Shemal Vatal. Kach Tiknu Kinuyim Shul Hurgub Haloshin Loimer Hashem Kainim. So it's a way in order to avoid the potential of saying Hashem's name Vatal. That's the reason. Okay. So now let's go back to the Mishnah. Hareini Kazeh. A person just says, I am like this. Hareini misalsel, hareini mechalchel, hariolai l'shaleach, pera, harizeh nazir. So a person says this language, which has to do with the removal of one's hair. So there, he's a nazir. So on this, the Taisa says, Taima di omer kizeh. It's because he said kizeh. Ha omer hareini. If you would say Hareini, that's not enough. It has to be because the language of Hariolai that you say Hari Zeh. Hareini Kizeh. I am like this. Ditfei mashma he kizeh min Hareini ki loy saim kazeh. So if you say kazeh, the diak is that's dafka in that situation will work, but if you say Hareini, it doesn't work. Okay, fine. And all these other languages, as Taisa says, are not considered to be Yados Naziros, because if they were, they would just be mentioned together with the other Yados. Fine. Rather, says Taisa, El Kivan de Gomer Diburoi, El Shaloi Pirish Lahedya Naziros. Anan, who the Mafarshtina Dibura Mashim Naziros, Baloimer Ki'im. Ki Omer Hanil Shonas with Tapas Basara. Okay, so we're going to see he has to be holding onto his hair. Okay. Hareini Ulai Tzipoirim. Now, again, one element of, in addition to what she mentioned about para, about with the hair, is also the sacrifice of birds. So Amer Omer Nazir, Omer Nazir. The question is, by mentioning that, which is part of the process of being a Nazir, is that suffice? Gemara. So Michti. Tana B'Seder Nashim Koi. This Masechta, we learned so far Yevamos, we learned Ksuvos, we learned the Darim, and now we're learning Nazir. Now Nazir has to do with bringing Karbanos, etc., in the Beis Hamikdash. It's hard to understand why this is found in Seder Nashim. So, for the Gemara, my time at Tani Nazir. Why is it mentioned over here? So your answer is Tana Krokoi. It's based on a pasuk. And if she's not favorable, if she's a sinner, you can divorce her. What causes sin? Yayin. If you see a saita, you should separate yourself from wine. You should make yourself into a nazir. So therefore, we see this link of sota, which is in Seder Nashim, as well as gerushin, which is of course in Seder Nashim. Masechtas Gittin is in Seder Nashim, so too this also should be in Seder Nashim. Says Taisus, the question was, Perish b'Seder Nashim, b'Seder Kachim, Havilei Lumisnei. Better to be in Seder Kachim, this Masechta, which talks about Hilchos Karbanos. Mishani, the answer is that Tana Karakai, V'hoya im v'goymer mi garim lo lavera yayin, koymer mi garim lo shezinsa. What caused her to sin? Yayin. Hilchach Tani Oyis Masechta b'Seder Nashim. That's why it's here. Interesting. So the Gemara now asks question 5. Question 5. Question 3. I say it's in a different order over here. I'm going to have to put this on the side because there's a different test. It's almost like they're all identical, but I wrote it down as it's question 5. Madua Seder Hatanas Masechtas Nazir Seder Noshim V'lo B'Kodshim. So as we said, because the pasuk of Ahoyimo Timsachin Beinav, if she was Mizana, it was probably because of wine, and we know that if you see a Saita in her defiled state, it should be Yazar Atzmani Yayin, and therefore that's why this whole Masechta is talking about Nazirus, of separating yourself from wine. Okay. So now the Gemara asks a question in the framework of this Mishnah, which is problematic. So the Gemara asks like this: Pasak b'kinuyin mafarsh yadais. So we end up beginning this Masechta kol kinuyin naziros k'nazirus. But then instead of immediately giving the examples of naziach, paziach, it mentions a yad of hoimer ahei harizen nazir, oh ahei non nazir. Those are yados. So why do we say, oh, there's kinuyim, but then we immediately start talking about yados? So Amar Rabbi v'itema kedi, that's really chaser mechso hachatani. Its words are missing. Kol kinuyim naziros k'naziros, v'yadois naziros k'naziros. So you have to throw in that as well. Ve'elhein yadois amar ahei harizen nazir. So therefore, we do mention yados in the introduction first. So therefore, now it makes sense. How come we have anything to do with ha'omer hey? What do you mean? Where is that coming from? So we added that, but we still have the difficulty because what we're saying now is that kinuyim are mentioned. We introduce kinuyim, we introduce yados, and then we start talking about yados. It would make more sense. We should, since we introduced kinuyim. And then yados, we should start going back to the first thing that was mentioned, which is kinuyim. So that's the Gemara's question. Lafarish kinui bereisha. So tana mahu desakahu mafarish bereisha, which is also a similar answer in Masechtas Brachos, that whatever we ended off with, which was yados, that's what we explained. So we just brush upon both ideas, kinuyim and yados, but when we got to get into depth, we're going to jump into that which we just mentioned last. Kiditnan. In the second parak of Masechtas Shabbos, first it says what can we use for candle lighting, what not for Shabbos. So it starts talking about ein madlikin bereisha because that was mentioned second. Or what is allowed to be used also Masechtas Shabbos for hatmana, for insulation. It's a moisav hevel, never shein moisav hevel. Mefarish ein taimnin bereisha. So same thing. Also in Masechtas Shabbos, so what type of jewelry or different garments is a woman allowed to go out with? So again, we see the second thing is what's explained first. So all these things, it's proof that that's the proper order, which is how our Mishnah is now going to read. When it talks about the various nose rings and halters, all these different things, saddles, hamardat, all these things. So in that Masechta in Shabbos, it says it the opposite way. It says, what can an animal go out with? What can it go out? And it explains what it can go out with. So we say it's not true. Furthermore, it's the other way around here also. Yesh noichen manchilin, noichen manchilin, manchilin b'lo noichen, noichen b'lo manchilin. So this is in the eighth parak, I believe it is, yes, in Masechtas Baba Basra, and it mentions first Mefarish Olav Noichel Manchilin Bereisha. So it mentions Noichel Manchilin, and then when it explains the first thing first. So how do we know which? Well, first, I guess in general, why did the Mishnayos do it this way? That's not consistent. The truth is, it could be written that way, it could be written that way. It doesn't really matter. El hasam the isur de nafsha hud mefarish, isur de nafshi bereisha. So when it comes over there, we're talking about an isur on the person himself, and therefore we want to be mefarish explain those isurim first. Gabe behema the isura id behemahu, since it's your animal, dias mefarish hatir bereisha. So in that situation, we want to mention that which is permissible first. So again, when it comes to Bama, behema yatsa ma'en yatsa. So we're talking about an animal. So we said, okay, fine. So it could be the other way around. It's not talking about an isur dinashe. It's talking about your behema. So the asim afarish. So therefore we mentioned the heterim first of what it can go out with first. Okay, so we're trying to, as we continue to base and base, come up with different answers why it's written and explain one before the other. It starts mentioning the Ikr Nachla first. Says the Mefarish, I think, the Gabi Yesh Noichanami Mishum the Ikr Nachlahu Mefarish Ikr Nachla Beresha El Hacha Lefarish Kinui Beresha. So again, how about when it comes to our case? It doesn't really seem to be any logical reason why you should mention one first. So it makes more sense that you should just explain that which was mentioned first, which is the kinuyim. Elohainu time. Yad Elohainu tam. Yadais. Hoyel v'asin lo midrasha chavivin le. So the reason why, you're right, maybe we should mention kinuyim first, but since yadais is something in which is derived from a drasha, so that's something which is more chashiv to us. Says the Mefarish, kavivin lo v'tani lo bereisha. V'yamrit kinui naziris nami asale midrasha. Don't kinuyim also come from midrasha? K'tani lo lasois kinui naziris k'naziris. So haloi havi midika hader v'tani bahahi bryce gufa nadarim ainli el naziris nadarim b'chulu umakish nadarim naziris. There's a hekesh. Ma naziris asabo yados naziris k'naziris afkan nadarim v'luchashe bahadayu kinui naziris. So it only mentions the drasha regarding yados. Alma bereishalo asa el mishum yados naziris k'naziris. Okay. So the Gemara says, okay, if that's the case, then liftach bohain bereisha. So then the Masechta should start off talking about yados. It should introduce yados. So Tana ki maschil be'ikr carbon. It begins with the ikr carbon, which is the kinui. Indian pirushe mefarish yados bereisha. However, when it comes to the explanation, because it's a drasha which is chaviv, so therefore we mentioned that first. Ha'aymer hey harizen nazir. So dilma hey b'tainis kaimer. How do we know what this guy's talking about? Maybe he just is accepting upon himself a fast. So Mishmul kagayin shehei nazir oivel fanav, as we said before, because the nazir is physically passing in front of him. So the reason why you need the nazir to be passing by you must be because he holds that Yodayim Shen Mechichos is not a yad, and therefore you need him to be going by. So Amri Bisman Shen Nazir Oivel Fanav, in a time when the nazir is passing in front of him, Leikelas Fuka b'milsachrina avol vadai. When it comes to him passing by, there's no doubt. It's clear that that's what your intention is. However, if not, then amrinan dilma hebatainus kaimer. So therefore, basically what some explain is it's not even yodayim shein mochichais. It's not the yodayim shein mochichas have yodayim. It's that it's really like nothing at all, because it could simply mean something entirely different. If you look in Taisus, this is how he says, Ein nazir over lafanav dilma hebatanis kamer pirush befil yad lo havi. It's not even yadais. Fine, it's not even a yad. So it's not yodayim shein mochichos, and that's a raya. Oh, maybe you must be hold yodayim shein mochichos is lo havi yodayim. No, maybe he holds yodayim shein mochichos havi yodayim, but this is not even a yad because it's so far off. Maybe he's just trying to potter himself from having to bring a carbon. That's all he's doing. So the Gemara answers the Kaimer Beliboy, that he had the intention to be a Nazir in his heart. So he has to have this thought process in his heart to be a Nazir, but he also needs, says Taisus, the Kabbalah Shabalev in a Klum. Just the Kabbalah Belev alone is not enough. You need to have a Nazir over Lefanav, and that would be good. Yihachi Malamemra. So if that's the case, that the Nazir passed by, and the person had this intention in his heart, so what's the whole problem? So Madatema Be'inan Piv Veliba Shavin Kamash Mulan. Maybe you would think that you need literally Piv Veliba Shavin, that everything has to be exactly the same. And look in Mefarish, Kamash Mulan Dobi'inan. It's not necessary. Vavashi Nazir over Lefanav, that's enough. ha'imei nazar v'lafanav v'afal gav di'amar b'leibo kivan d'lo yichaytza b'svasam lo yihavi mucha milsa. Then it's not clear what exactly your intention is. If you look above in the Mafar, she says that the Ksavar Shmuel Yadayim Shin Machichas Kaimer Midikam Moikim Shmuel Kagayin Shehe Nazir V'Lafanav. Why does he have to say that case? Halav Hachi Leiko Sfuki Ben Nazir Klal must be because Ksavar Yadayim Shin Machichas Lav Yadayim. That he requires that you have to have a Nazir passing by you. The opposite is learned. If you say Har Mikudeshesli, Haryat Mikudeshes, Har Mereses, Haryat Le'into, we don't say Li, Harizum Mikudeshes, Mafkadomer Li. So it must be, even though it doesn't say Li over there, that's our proof that Yadayim Shin Machichas have Yadayim. So on this, he explains that Olam Ksavar Shmuel Yadayim Shin Machichas have Yadayim really does work. Kegain Gabi Eris and Kedushin, as we just mentioned. Kivan de Midker Shem Eris and Kedushin, since he mentions marriage, he says Harit Mikudeshes, Havi Hochacha b'mixas. It's something. V'hacha hainu time to be in the lios nazar v'lafanav. The reason why you have to have a nazar passing is to equal a member. You can say a hebatitis kamer. It could be something totally different. V'lo havi hochacha klal. The lekel mekamul had a milsa. There's no way to understand what he's talking about. Kiyamer batitis or benaziris. It could be either way. V'lo havi nazir delo nas naziris el b'haflah. It's necessary, as we've seen elsewhere, that a Nazirus, at the time that the Nazirus is Chal, it has to be that there's complete, clean, clear understanding of exactly what's being said. TA 7. Ha'omer hey harizen Nazir. Minoan delo nischavin latainis. How do we know that this guy's not talking about a fast? Minoan delo lepartum carbon kaimer. So he says, Bekarbin lo talin de ma'ben Nazir of lafanav. The pot from a carbon lo talin de kamer belibo hayol nazirasai. Because in his heart, he says that this is his intention. And almost the same, TB8 says, Ha'omer hey harizei nazir, ma'du hamidu b'gemar da'mayri davka shasar olafanav. Why is it necessary that nazir has to be by him? Because the below over olafanav, if the nazir is not there, then havu yadayim she'in mochichais. O doloi havi yad klal l'chad girsa, as we saw in Taisus, the dilma hebatitis kaimer. So therefore, that's the reason why TB8, it's necessary that you have to have a nazir being over l'fanav. Otherwise, it's not really clear what your intentions are at all when you made that statement. Good. Okay, so let's go a little bit weiter. So the Gemara says as follows. Hey, no, Nazir. So the Mishnah said that if a person makes a statement that I'm going to enhance myself, so that also is considered to be a yad. So says the Gemara, maybe he just wants to enhance himself by doing more mitzvahs. It's a beautiful thing. How does one glorify Hashem? No lafanav b'mitzvahs, do mitzvahs. Esel lafanav sukkah, make a beautiful sukkah. Lulav na, tzitzis na, echtav lafanav sefer Torah. No, you should write a beautiful sefer Torah. V'acharenu b'shirayin noyim, you should wrap it up in beautiful silk. So how do you know what this person is talking about? So Amar Shmuel shetafas b'saro. He's physically holding on to hair. So if we look in Taisus, he's referring to mitzvos which are connected to the hair, like which is referring to Nazirus. We're not going to say that he's not holding onto the hair, but the reason why we're going to interpret this is because there was a Nazir walking by. We don't use that same answer, the Nazir's walking by. Why? It says Taisus the Dilma hebetainis leikli shnui Mishetafas Basaro, in fact, he's holding onto his hair, below Nazir Arvulafanav, and the Nazir's not in front of him, the Olam Mishtal Mashaper, the Hebatinis, Ki Ein Nazir Arvulafanav. Afagab the Tafas Basaro. Vahashta Asi Shaper the Masnisin, Palginhu, Betray Bobby, Ha'omer, Hey Harizin Nazir, O Hey Har, O Aha, No, Afagab the Devayu Yadosninhu, Mishum the Mafarshi Betray Timing. So explains beautifully. This is the reason why the Mishnah we saw before Why is it that it's split into two parts? And the answer is because the reason why, even though they're both yados, they're for different reasons. One is because Nazir is on Wolfanov, and the other one is due to the hair. Says question 6. Homer ahehar is a Nazir or aheh na Nazir amai palginhu hatana betray babi afagad devai yados ninhu. So he said because the explanation is for two different reasons. The reish is because is Nazir Zolofanav, and the safe is Matafas Besaira. Okay. So the Oimer Ahan Nazira Milsa the Aveira V'Yermale Na. So he asks a question. It's hard to understand that he's saying I'm trying to enhance myself, but the reality is that some people will interpret Nazirus to be not a good thing, right? That how is it possible to enhance yourself with the Nazirus milsa di avera? So the fact is that a person who's restricting himself from all these different things, is not a good thing. So if you look in the Mefarish, the milsa Nazirus, me having Nazirus milsa, denoy, is it really good? Why would we tell people that's enhancing? Why is Nazirus enhancing? It should be not a good thing. So as we continue, Gimel Aleph in Diafil Rabbi Lezer Kapper, even in Kohen Lezer Kapper, who we've seen many times, the Omer Nazir Chayta, he's considered a sinner because you've separated yourself from wine. So that's something in which is not a good thing. So Hani Mili Gabi Nazir Tame. Perhaps the only time is actually if you are not good with your Nazir, so you became Tame. The Ida the boy Mitzar Dami Rachmana V'Hayamim Harishonim Yiplu Ki Tame Nizroi. So in this situation, there is a chance Hasam who Dilma Asi Lamevral Nazir Seha. The problem is because now you're extending your days of Tumah, you may already now have Harata, and you may therefore end up bringing Chul Lazara. And therefore, the whole issue of being a sinner is dafka when you became Tameh, because all of a sudden your Nazirus, which maybe you thought was going to be a shorter period of time, all of a sudden extended. Nazir Tahir, someone who did not become Tameh does not fall into the category of someone who would constitute as a sinner. Ad Kan.